Hey, how's it going?
It's going great. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. It's a pleasure to meet you.
No, the pleasure is all mine.
Yeah, no worries. I was just on the phone with Larry Levine. He said to say hi.
Oh, I was actually going to bring up that connection.
Yeah,
The podcast. I mean, this really just goes into what I want to dig into with you is this idea of building your network and sharing knowledge and adding value, and how that then eventually builds into a brand. And individuals like yourself and others out there that have done a really good job of this. So I want to kind of go into that kind of the idea of how you went into it, kind of your background. I kind of dug around a little bit, and I'll have some
yeah.
questions. But first off, I want to congratulate you on the new book.
Thank you.
Tell me about the book. I mean, I kind of looked through your landing pages and some of the descriptions of it. I actually want to read this because anything that talks about sales and marketing alignment is really in my wheelhouse.
Awesome. Well, I'll have a copy headed your way. I'm mailing some out today, like we do. So, but yeah, I'd love to put a copy in your hand. All of this came out of a sabbatical a year and a half ago, where I just realized, it was one of those "what am I going to do next" moments, and so it was. And I'm on the board of several nonprofits. And so in that, you just see who moves the needle, right? It's forward-thinking business people. And so I was like, do I go to work for a nonprofit? Do I keep growing my business, so I've got resources to give into it? Or then I just got this idea of like, why don't I just help great businesses grow? And, we'd worked with a lot of really good, well, I've worked with some dirt bags over the years, but worked with a lot of really good businesses. And so really out of that kind of came this whole idea. Why don't, let's put the ideas down. You saw my background. I spent 27 years, half in sales, half in marketing, foot in both worlds.
I want to dig into that for a second, because I think that is kind of, I'm thinking this is the catalyst of kind of how you kind of landed into this. Right, like I looked through your background. You were a district manager. You were a sales manager, and then you kind of made this pivot after what was that, Toshiba?
It was
into this new world. What happened? What was kind of the thought process then? You're like, I need to figure out how to. There's something better out there, and I'm going to start building it on my own. Walk me through that, because I think that's where your brand really started.
It did. It was pre-2004. I mean, it was back when, pre-LinkedIn, obviously. And I was at a leadership retreat and for a nonprofit. And the guy that was speaking, his name was Andy Stanley. He said, I don't remember anything else about what he said, but he said, I want you to go outside right now with a piece of paper. And on one half, I want you to write down everything that you're good at. And then on the other half, I want you to write down everything that you enjoy doing. So at the time, I was in a sales management role. I actually had a brief sales management job between Toshiba and what I'm doing now. And I knew it was one of those jobs you knew you shouldn't have taken, but the money was really good. It wasn't as much travel. And so I'm miserable, right? I'm 9 months into this job in a role that I knew I wasn't supposed to be in. Terrible sales manager. And so I believe everybody. So you can't manage sales reps and believe everybody. But so I go outside, I make that list. I enjoy coming up with new ideas and teaching them to people. And what was I good at? At that time, I had a niche where I was really good at document management and workflow software. So this is 17, 18 years ago. And so I came back into the meeting and Andy goes, okay, here's what I want you to do. See what you wrote down on that piece of paper? Stop doing everything else. And that moment was just this watershed moment in my life. And this is great advice. I was just sharing this the other day with someone. I hadn't talked about it in a long time, but it was that moment when I realized I don't have to do stuff I don't like and not good at. So I started a company training people.
Was this an aha moment of like a superpower you had? Was your manager at that point like, holy shit, like you can do something that like is outside of what everybody else should be able to do? Like, that you focus on this.
It really was that aha moment. I mean, I had some guys to thank along the way. At the time, I guess in the years leading up to that, I'd started consuming Robert Kiyosaki, Robert Allen, went to training with, oh my gosh. Anyhow, I started investing in myself and thinking about business, I just didn't know where I would start. And that catalyst to realizing these are the things I'm good at, coming up with new ideas, sharing them with people. And I know this niche of software. So I hung a shingle out and said, I'm going to start a training company, a sales training company, training salespeople how to sell this software. And in the industry we're in, I came out of the same industry as Larry's, office technology. It was a very backwards, hardware focused, it was like IBM 2.0, right? IBM went
My sales career was in backup software, disaster recovery.
Oh, okay.
And so it's totally unsexy, very technical. Right. Nobody really wants to talk about it.
Yeah, no, this was backup, scan your documents, yes. Right? Type thing. And nobody wanted to do it. It was a very hard sale. It was, very, very expensive to do for a lot of companies. So you really had to, a lot of what I learned actually is philosophy that's followed me all the way along. Buyers don't buy products, buy outcomes. But yeah, so that was the moment. So the funny thing though, and this is where I graduated with a marketing degree, but I wanted to make some money. And so, I got into sales, right? I didn't want to sit in a cubicle all day. And so anyhow, my first training client was a company down in Houston. Actually, my first client was Toshiba. So I got a contract with my previous employer. When they found out I wanted to go on my own, they said, we've got a problem to solve. Can you fix this training program we built? My pilot was down in Houston. I got done training their whole sales team. And the owner came to me that night at dinner and was like, hey, Darrell, everything you taught my team, this pure dynamite, but our marketing doesn't say anything about it. Do you build websites? So being my first client, you know what the answer was, right? Yes, sir, we built a website. The next thing you know, I'm doing sales training during the, traveling around doing sales training. It went like wildfire because I was the only person doing it. So I was going all over North America. Within a year, I was in UK, and then we had clients in Australia. I mean, I went from, being a territory sales manager to flying all over the world in 18 months. It was really crazy. I'll talk about my brand in a sec, but that moment, that first client was like, do you build websites? Yes, sir. So I built one for a nonprofit. And so I'd go do sales training. And then in the airports and on the days I wasn't training, I was learning how to use Microsoft Front Page, and I was building these atrocious looking. It was so embarrassing.
Front Page. That's awesome.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So, and then, then it started to grow. Then I started hiring, I outsourced to India. And then next thing we had a whole team. And then social came along. And I met Larry, by the way, doing that sales training 15 years ago at the company.
I was going to ask where that connection came in because it's such an interesting space. And I met Larry years ago. I came across him, and what he was doing and what you're both doing in this copier space, like it was revolutionary. I mean, it was basically like turning the entire process upside down. And I was like, if you can change the Xerox industry, like that printing industry, you can change anything. Because that was a behemoth. So
here's the personal brand story. So this is crazy. So, I mean, I'm a Canadian kid. I married a Southern girl. I live just outside Little Rock, Arkansas. So, that is basically in the middle of nowhere, right? And so...
Where in Canada are you from?
What's that?
Where in Canada?
Near Toronto, London, Ontario.
Okay, got it.
Yep. So, so I get this idea. I'm going to do some sales training. And at the time, I was actually doing a software install, and I was reading a magazine in the industry. It's an industry trade publication. And I'm like, who writes all these articles? So I flip to the front. There's the editor of the magazine, and his phone number is there. So I pick up my flip phone, and I call him, and I say, hey, Brent, this is Darrell. I, am a document solution specialist helping dealers transfer, some pitch. And we start talking, and about 15 minutes in, he's like, would you like to write an article for my magazine? And I'm thinking to myself, how much is this going to cost? Like, I had no idea.
Why did you reach out to him to begin with? Like, what did you think of outside of who's writing this? Like, what was that end result that you're looking for in that phone call?
Well, I wanted to get my name out there.
Yeah.
And back then, now we've got so many ways to get our name out there, but back then you're going to speak at a conference or write in a trade magazine. I mean,
yeah,
really,
there wasn't a lot of options.
Yeah.
The barrier of entry was pretty high.
Yeah, it really was. So, but I didn't, I had no idea. I thought I was going to have to pay money to write in this magazine because I'm going, so I'm like, yeah, how much is it? And he goes, we'll give you if you write an article, we'll give you a half page of advertising for free. So I'm like, wow, this is good.
Wow.
So I sit down and I write this article. And it was so over the top. It was why you better transition into the software business or you'll be out of bankrupt in 36 months or something. It was ridiculous.
Okay, let's stop there for a second. Because what you just said actually it should be drilled into. The very first article you wrote, when you got your shot, you had your first shot. You're going to put yourself out there. You chose a controversial kind of opposing conversation that is going to be polarizing to most of the people who are reading this, right?
Okay, so
and you decided on this. Okay, let's go.
It's even worse.
Because I want to point that out, because I think that's one of the reasons why, one of the ways people build a professional brand is they need to launch with some chaos.
Yes.
And so I wanted to kind of point that out to the people who listen to this. Like, that's like the reason why I think this worked for you is because you chose that polarizing statement to kind of go out with.
I think so. That was a real big moment. And so what was so funny was by the way, I wrote that, and at the end of the article, it basically says Darrell Amy is an expert, right? It's a paragraph and my phone number's at the end. And sure enough, my phone rings one day and it said, this is so-and-so. I'm driving down the road reading your article and I had to call. And of course I said, you need to pull over.
Yeah.
But, and so the phone started ringing. It was a couple months later, another magazine called me, another trade magazine, and said, would you write for our magazine? And I said, and they made a big pitch about how much bigger their audience was. And so I said, sure. So the very first article I wrote for them was another over-the-top article on why you need to get in the software business. And on the cover of the magazine was the CEO of the largest dealership group in our space. And his article, I was the counterpoint to the smartest guy in the industry who said, getting in the software business is a total distraction. It's the dumbest thing in the world you should ever do. And don't bother, don't waste your time. So here's the cover of the magazine with a billionaire saying what I'm saying is stupid. And
here's Darrell on page 27, basically countering this guy.
Right. Yeah, here's a 30-year-old kid who thinks that it's a bad idea to get in the software business. But that's how we did it back then. And we launched training. I mean, I literally.
How did you feel about that? Were you fearful? Were you scared? When you started getting this kind of backlash? And because one of the other things that I truly believe about building a brand outside of having a polarizing kind of anchor is you're going to understand that you have to have haters. There are going to be people out there, especially when you first start out, that are vehemently against and almost aggressive against you to try and hold you down. And I faced this myself when I started talking about the benefits of using LinkedIn for sales and how my anchor was cold calling is dead. And I used to sing that from the rooftops. The idea of making cold calls was stupid. And if you're making your reps do that, you're wasting their time. And
that went over really well, didn't it?
It did. In the very first article I wrote about this, it was about, changing out the old guard and this idea that social media was going to take over. And I was working at a company, and I remember vividly having the CEO walk over to my desk with his laptop and showing me an email from a very notable person in the space that emailed the CEO and said, who the fuck is this guy? And what is he writing about? He's going to burn you guys down if you continue on this path. And I was thinking to myself, oh my gosh, that's not good. And then I had some good mentors, and they're like, nope, that means you're on the right path. Right? If there's going to be some haters, but people are obviously adopting into it. They believe there's enough believers. So how did you find that? How did you find that community?
I think that, so really what happened, and I think this is so strong, is I don't know that I realized that I was stepping into the middle of something controversial. It was just, I knew the industry was, I knew as a maverick kind of in the industry. But what ended up happening out of that was people started paying attention. And so, you had the believers and the curious started reaching out to me. So as I mentioned, next thing I know, I go from, not knowing anybody in an industry, and I had a niche with about 2,500 businesses in it. I went from not knowing anybody to, within 2.5 years, one of my clients was Hewlett Packard. So I went from like zero to working with a large global company, that they reached out to me and wanted help because I became a respected or known name in that, for that specialty in that channel. And so, in some ways it's kind of interesting because we're talking about, of course, now fast forward 17 years, we've got LinkedIn, we've got podcasts, we've got all the channels. In some ways, I think it might have been easier back then because there just wasn't as many places to get information. But on the other side of things, now earlier this year, publishing a book, you're able to immediately get a voice out to the world in a way I don't know that you would have been able to do 17 years ago.
It would almost be impossible, right? Like to sell a book and actually get a wide audience unless the publisher was doing mass.
Yeah. Right.
And now with social media, you have your own bullhorn. And as long as you know how to build that audience correctly, and they're going to help you amplify it, which is going to be even more powerful than having a marketing machine behind it because people buy from 100%. People.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So it's that part of the journey though, early on, I think, if I look back and even just reflecting on it right now, had I just gone out and said, I'm going to do sales training, like I'm going to do just your basic generic sales training, there's no way I would have got attention as quickly as I did in saying, I'm putting a stake in the ground. I don't do sales training. I teach you how to get in this specific business. So if you want in this business, give me a call and I'll help you get there. And, and those relationships that were formed now 17, 18 years ago, many of those relationships, I was still on, I was Zoom meetings with some of those people this morning. And, lifelong friends like Larry Levine came out of that season. There's no way I would have met Larry outside of, putting that stake in the ground and getting invited out to his business to do sales training.
And so, at what point did you realize that a personal brand was a thing? And did you really want one? And then, was there this moment you're like, holy shit, like people know who I am? Was it from that first article? Because it had to happen before the book, right? Like there was a moment where you're like, I have a brand and I'm going to start building this outside of whatever the company was that you were working on. You wanted to build a personal identity around it.
Yeah. I don't know that back then I really thought about it that way. What I was more concerned about were the ideas, and I'm an idea guy, right? I'm a 5 on the Enneagram. I'm a strategist on the Strengths Finder. I mean, I'm always coming up with ideas. So that was my lead, right? Is come up with innovation and ideas. So I don't know that I set out to be the disruptor guy. Once again, back then, I didn't even have a LinkedIn profile. This was pre-social. I don't think I really realized how, this is confessions of a marketing guy, right? So I help companies market themselves, but I don't know that I thought of my own brand as something that I needed to intentionally and strategically develop until I met Larry Levine. And Larry started calling me around 2007, 2008. We'd been friends for several years. He, as you know, was a pioneer in using LinkedIn in the marketplace he was in LA. And so he was asking me questions because I was a marketing guy. And, and of course those conversations, I was getting way more out of them because he was a pioneer in that, to the point where Larry, before he got on LinkedIn, was actually building his own website. He had someone build a website for him. So when he went on cold calls or when he went on appointments, got referred, he could say, this is who I am, go to, this domain. And so I think it was when I met Larry 13, it's been a longer, 12, 13 years ago, that I went, my own brand actually matters. So that was really kind of a watershed moment for me. And, that was just a cold glass of water in the face to go, hey, this is a deal. But I built a brand without really even knowing that's what I was doing, I guess.
I think most people do. I mean, because the reality is everybody has a brand. That's kind of my talk track. Like if I ask, your 4 coworkers and your family and your friends, tell me about Darrell, they're going to give me answers, and that's your brand. The concept is, and you nailed it. Like, how are you being thoughtful and strategic on what that is, and how do you kind of like have like some just, I guess, formalization. And I think your background and kind of your ideology around process, how does that play into now how you are building out this personal brand of yours?
I think everything shifted when I realized that I wanted to be someone that had influence on a broader scale. So, over that period of 10, the interesting thing, Coke, is I started that sales training as just a nobody guy with an idea and a magazine article. And then fast forward
it's the best career start.
Yeah, I had no idea. I didn't read a book. I didn't have a coach. I just shared my ideas, and they were controversial, and it got some attention. But then, to fast forward the end of that story, as I was getting ready to broaden my influence, I got a phone call one day from London, and lo and behold, it is the largest company in the office technology space that I'd been working in all these years, and in some ways competing against, calling me up saying, will you help us develop our new sales training program? So the end of that story, 15 years later of building a brand and working with some amazing people along the way, I got to rebuild training for Xerox and roll it out globally, which was, just this great capstone of working in that
massively
industry.
Validating.
It was so cool. And once again, it was not something I sought out. It was just based on personal brand and reputation, that phone call came in, and it was a wonderful project to work on, and very, very cool to tie together all that experience that I'd had. And by the way, I've had so many, and I think you could say the same thing. I mean, so many amazing experiences in my life, and traveled to, met, incredible people, and had opportunities open up that I never would have dreamed of, all because of taking that step out, writing that article, and, getting swept into some incredible opportunities, conversations, and relationships. So I'm profoundly grateful, but as that industry continues to consolidate, I knew that I wanted to, and also I wanted to increase my personal impact beyond a narrow focus. So when I started writing Revenue Growth Engine, which was in May of 2019, launched in May of 2020, I knew that I was going to have to do something different, that I was going to have to broaden my reach, broaden my impact. And so I think it's in some sense in the last year, I've reinvented myself just the way I did back in 2004, in terms of stepping out into the marketplace and, and bringing some ideas that are controversial. And, you've got me thinking today about some controversial ideas that I've kept in my hip pocket, or maybe not been so vocal about, that are written and ready to share. So, and now what's great, you don't have to beg a magazine publisher to publish your article, right? I mean, Now, tomorrow morning on LinkedIn, thank you, we can put that content out to the world and immediately get get in front of thousands of people, which is really astounding. But so I found myself now in the social digital era, kind of going through that whole journey again, in rebranding and putting myself out to the broader world. And so far, it's going well. It's been amazing. Once again, the conversations that have opened up, the people that I'm meeting, and just stuff that happens seemingly out of the blue that you go, wow, that was cool, right? And doors that are opening up. So personal branding, right? And I feel like even though I've come a long way, there's still so much more to learn, and so many different things, so many different ways to brand yourself now that were just simply not available 17 years ago, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, and I used to be asked all the time about being an expert in social media and these other things, and I used to really shy away from it. Maybe part of it was imposter syndrome, but I really did believe, and I still do. Like, one of the reasons why people asked over the years about writing a book, like, I was like, I can't write a book about this because it's going to change. By the time I'm done writing it, this social ecosystem is going to change. Obviously, I could have written a book still. I'm making excuses. I understand this, but it just, like, going back into what you were just saying, like this idea of reinvention. Like, there are so many things constantly being launched and made available to individuals to allow them to have this voice. What would you tell your younger self? Let's go. What would you tell your 20-year-old self if you knew now? Back then, that could have even made your career even better than what it is today?
I think the answer I'd give reflexively is take more risks. However, I think the 20s are a really good time to get some baseline experience. So, one of the things that concerns me is seeing people step out to be an expert in an area, try to be an expert or recognized as an expert in an area where they have little expertise or experience.
Yes.
So that's happening a lot now. And I think that, so I think in some ways I would tell my 20-year-old self, do what you did, like get in there, get in the mix. I mean, certainly if I was to rewind back into college and all of that, I would have switched majors from my business major into computer science, moved out to Silicon Valley and hung out.
Been like a millionaire who created Facebook. Exactly.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we all would have done that, right? But I think that that decade, for me, it was 12 years of just really solid experience in the business world, doing things I didn't always enjoy doing, watching, paying attention to what was broken, and all of that. So, but I would say to my, I would say to my younger self, take some more risks. And certainly, I'm thankful. I mean, I told that story earlier about, what are you good at? What do you enjoy doing? I'm so that day was so pivotal in my life because it gave me the courage. And I still have, and I was in a cushy job. I mean, I was in a really cushy job with a tech company and a virtually unlimited expense account and all of that. It was not easy to leave. In fact, some of my coworkers are still there doing the exact same thing. And, and they've had a wonderful career, but I would have missed out the adventure if I hadn't have taken the risk. So I would say, yeah, take the risk, but all of it, yeah, I think to my younger self, I probably would have even paid more attention to just watch and see where the opportunities are, where the problems are, and where you really can make an impact. And I think I had no idea that at 30 something, early 30s, that I would be on airplanes to other continents giving advice to business people, right? And large corporations. I had no idea that would happen.
But it was from Toronto, and now he's flying to Singapore to give like a business conference.
Right? What's up with that? I'm a farm kid from Ontario, Canada. But yeah, but this personal branding thing, I mean, has really, it's changed my life. And it's, it changed the trajectory of my life. And I'm thankful to be here today. The personal branding right now of being able to take your thoughts, organize them, and create a book, and the ease at which you can publish a book right now, I think is an opportunity that didn't exist 17 years ago. I don't know if I was ready to write a book 17 years ago. But now, the exercise of writing a book and getting it published, thanks to our friends at Amazon, you don't have to go big. Yeah, you don't have to beg 20 publishers. And what's amazing is it's the other way around. I've got the book published. We're very, as part of the branding and some of the things we learned along the way, we're able to get a bestseller status and all of that stuff on the morning of day one, which was so cool. And so I'm looking over here. I mean, this is it's a letter from a publisher saying we want your book. And I wouldn't have dreamed that
should be coming to you,
coming to me, right? Personal branding. And so, as I reflect on this topic today, I think I stumbled across a lot of this. I owe a lot to Larry Levine because he really did challenge me in that area. But so much of what I enjoy today is because of personal branding, which led to relationships. And, we always say your network is your net worth. And, but that network came out of personal branding. And a lot, the last thing I'd say on that is personal branding's got to have some grit. You can't just have you got to have, and this is why you're talking about that decade of the 20s or whatever, you really do need some experience, because I think personal branding gets you in the door. But if you show up and there's nothing there, Larry calls it the empty suit, right? If you show up and there's nothing there, then the brand's not going to last very long. You got to have something to back it up. But I know plenty of people that have a lot of grit, a lot of experience, and a lot to offer that haven't built a personal brand, haven't stepped out. And if, those are people, I would say at least once a week, I have a conversation with somebody where it's like, hey man, you need to go for it, right? You need to step out, and you've got a lot to offer the world. So this is a cool time to be alive.
It is, and back to it's the topic of, in your 20s, I've had a lot of conflicts in my own life on my own personal brand, going back to the imposter syndrome and whatever else that may be, just your own baggage, or call it head trash.
Yes.
But, there was an idea, and I'm sure I talked with Larry about it, way back then. It was around this idea of thought leadership. And I didn't really want to be known as a thought leader. Granted, I had great ideas, I had all these things, but I looked around at the ecosystem of thought leaders, and I said, these guys, a lot of them, some of them were really legit, and some of them were still friends, but there were many that I looked at like complete bozos, empty suits, as Larry would call them. Yep. And, I was always more focused on what I called do leadership. Can you do the work? Are you mastering this craft? Because if you can master a craft and articulate it and teach other people how to do it, then you are really a leader in the space, outside of just talking about the theories behind everything. Like, can you do any of those things? If not, then it's just fluff. And I know, just based on this conversation and obviously how close you are with Larry and knowing Larry, like that is very much in the same vein. Like if you can't do it, don't talk about it. Or talk about it in the context of, I want to know more about this. Don't talk like you're an expert in a space if you can't, put the metal to the gridiron.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it is. Okay. It's an amazing time. And what a great conversation, man.
Yeah, no, and I really do appreciate having this opportunity, and I hope like we can continue this, in other formats, even if I just bring you into a conversation on LinkedIn or something. I want to be respectful of time, though, so I'll let you go. Thank you so much. My goal with this is then, I'll kind of chop some of this up, maybe turn it into a blog post. But I really do appreciate the idea that you take the time out of your day to kind of walk me through this.
Totally cool. Hey, and Larry said, Darrell, get Coca on the Selling from the Heart podcast. We need to make that happen. You want to do that?
Absolutely. Let's do that.
Okay. I'll have Larry reach out with calendar. That would be a fun. That's been in. Yeah, I won't even get started on that. Let me just say this about the podcast. Larry came to me 4 years ago and he goes, we need to do a podcast. I'm like, no one's going to listen to two copier sales guys in a podcast. Come on, man. What a waste of time. And so he kept coming at me. And finally, one day we were at the Bellagio at a conference. I said, what do you want to call it? He goes, let's call it Selling from the Heart. And I was like, oh, dang, that's really good. And so that's where it began. I got on my iPad, made the bumper music. And later that afternoon, we had our first, episode going out the door. It was crazy. And,
man. See, we talk about like OODA loops and things along those lines. Like you had an idea, you put it together and you acted on it. What was like 24 hours? You had a podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. We
That's how
recorded,
fast.
we had no gear. We didn't know what we were doing. We sat in front of my laptop in a hotel room in the Bellagio and recorded the first episode of Selling from the Heart. So we've come a long way since then, but yeah, it was like, okay, let's do it. And then next thing you know, I mean, the doors that has opened up, astounding, just
Yeah.
astounding, really amazing.
All right, Darrell.
So
I can probably talk to you for hours.
yeah, totally
Thank
cool.
you so
Koga. Have a
much.
great weekend. Pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure meeting you. Talk to you soon.